fire this shit off, and if I can find the damn video, because Martin's usually here.
I believe in you.
There it is. Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubbs of the Club, brought to you tonight by Snake River Stampede Whiskey for the special edition of Tubbs after midnight if you're in the Mountain Time Zone, Tubbs just before midnight if you're in the Pacific Time Zone. But we'll tell you a little bit more about Snake River later in the episode. We are the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm Dallas Hammer, joined by brave, bold, braving the snow, Brian Marceau.
Yeah, dude. That's why we're going as late as we are. I actually really like these late night episodes, Dallas. And one of the things I like about them is when we record after games like this, our voices are just garbage. And I think y'all know why, because I didn't see the attendance numbers, but the turnout was pretty good. It was a real fun game. We'll obviously talk about it. Crowd was way better, way more energetic than Eastern. And, I helped take part in that. So anyway, dude, there's just nowhere I'd rather be.
Yeah, we're going to jump right into it because Brian actually led off mentioning the attendance, which is how I wrote our little intro today. So for those of you who, for some reason, are listening to this and not someone who watched the game, which, again, there's probably only one single person, but like always, our quick little recap here. Just under 10,000, the official number being 9,851 people were in attendance tonight for Senior Day and the final regular season home game in the Kibbe Dome. Jack Lane returned as the starting quarterback, connected with Mark Hamper early on to get Idaho out to an early 7-0 lead. But special teams miscues let Weber State back into it, and they took a 14-10 lead at halftime. However, the Vandal defense was strong all night, holding Weber State to just 6 first downs until their final 2 drives. Idaho was moving the ball well enough for Cameron Pope to hit 3 field goals, including a 50-yarder, and take the lead for good, 16-14 with 2 minutes and 22 seconds left in the third quarter. But it was a redshirt freshman who was the star of senior night, Mark Hamper having an absolute career day, 8 catches, 187 yards, and 3 touchdowns, capped off by one of the most miraculous 74-yard run / catches. It was a catch for maybe in a yard, and the rest of it, he ran 74 yards from front to back, but the side to side, Brian, he had to put in well over 100 yards. He was throwing up on the sideline afterwards. Gave Idaho a 2-touchdown lead with under 2 minutes to play. Vandals hang on to win 31-24 and go undefeated in the Kibbe Dome for the first time since 1996, Brian.
I can't believe that you shit on the lead and didn't even include Mark Hamper with 1 yard rushing on that one Wildcat rush.
I completely fucked the show up. This completely ruined the episode. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you're bad. You're right. So, dude, this was just another weird Idaho game. That's kind of been the theme of this season, right? I mean, like, Idaho's played a ton of close games, some of which didn't actually feel close for a lot of the games, some of which were. This game itself, look, I mean, the story of the game is defense. Idaho absolutely. Weber was averaging 38, 39 points in Big Sky play heading into this game. And we'll obviously hit some offensive stuff, but like, hey, spoiler, like it took the offense a minute to really kind of get clicking into the second half. But we had been talking, and hey, this was kind of my take. So I gotta correct myself here more so than Dallas. Is in particular over the last couple of weeks, trying to figure out like what's the takeaway from how Idaho was against Eastern and Portland State. Both those games, Idaho did have stronger second halves. This game, I mean, this was the Idaho defense of the first 3 weeks, just back for pretty much the entire game. Like Weber had 2 drives that were sustained at the end of the game, but other than that, Dallas, you're right. Like Weber kept us competitive because of special teams issues. That was it. Idaho absolutely was holding one of the better offenses in the Big Sky to pretty much nothing, to pretty much no drives. And I mean, look, Malachi Williams picked up a couple sacks as well. That's in spite, hey, Idaho was dominant. They lost Keyshawn James Newby very early in the game. And then he was out. He was in street clothes pretty quick. So yeah, the story of this game is defensively, Idaho completely for a ton of this game shut Weber State down. In particular, and hey, we say this sometimes, like, yeah, you do need to actually like watch the games to be able to know what some of your overall takeaways should be. Weber State rushed 28 times for 78 yards. Like, yeah, I know they gained 91 yards, but like Mickey Mental does like to run the ball. He has 2 running backs that he goes to. Damon Bankston's one of the better running backs in the Big Sky. And
in the league in rushing yards.
Yeah, Idaho, no, like he looked pedestrian against Idaho. Like, so no, if you were like me and you were like with the Portland State game narrowly, you're like, okay, well, what's my takeaway? Takeaway is Portland State was weird for half, and then Idaho was fine defensively, and that's how they were the entirety of this game on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Brian, you mentioned the rushing numbers were so low. They had under 100 yards. They had under 80 yards going into the final drive of the second quarter. They ended up scoring, and that's when they took the lead. And it was the first time in a very long time that I've gone into a game at half and the Vandals are trailing, and I had zero panic, absolutely no panic. It was special teams miscues on both sides of the ball. We got the ball around the 50 a couple times. They got the ball around the 50 a couple times, and they did a better job scoring than Idaho did. You can certainly complain about the offense in the first half. Brad Smith in the comment section, I see Day in crutches on the sideline later in the game. Unfortunately, Brad, yes, you did.
You did.
So again, Keyshawn James Newby injured early. Tried to play through it. Definitely was on the sideline trying to work through the injury. Couldn't do it.
A shoulder injury.
The second half, yes, shoulder injury. Ended up in street clothes the second half. Took the pads off near the end of the first half, and then Day unfortunately crutched off the field and then came back for the second half in street clothes and then some sort of cast or boot around his foot. So not sure what happened there. Don't really want to speculate on what the specific injury is, but yeah, unfortunately, Keyshawn and Day both out. Art Williams supposedly also out. Saw that in the Discord. Didn't get a chance to hear it on the post game, but apparently Art Williams also got hurt. So we were down to Nate Thomas was the only quote unquote healthy running back, and I don't think he played a snap in the first half, Brian, because he probably there as the emergency running back in case running backs 3 and 4 get hurt. Running back 2 is healthy enough to do it in a pinch, and that's what happened tonight. So really unfortunate for Idaho, the injuries, but getting back to the defense, Brian, this was they held Weber State under 300 yards. The final score was 31-24. It should not have been that close. Shout out to Kyron Beecham and KJ Trujillo for absolutely nuking each other on the play that ended up allowing a 57-yard touchdown to Jacob Sharp, where it made this game much closer than it was. But realistically, when Hamper smashed in that 74-yarder and it was 31-17, like that was the moment the game was over. It was honestly, it felt over when Hamper was halfway down the field and then he ran 5 yards backwards and was able to cut across the field and score it. And yeah,
like, hey, I want to contextualize this too before we talk, because we'll talk offensively. Because hey, like Weber State has 3 wins, and if you are not following the Big Sky, like a 3-win team, we usually don't call those good. According to Brett Hine, he's a beat reporter, covers Weber State. He's covered Weber State for a long time. This outing against Idaho was the best Weber State's played in about 6 weeks. And Idaho still, even with the offensive stuff, we have to talk about, because the first half was clearly not as smooth, let's say, not as cohesive as the second half. Weber played great for Weber State, and still, like, Idaho had no issue with stopping what Weber wanted to do offensively. And Weber's a good offensive team. The issue that's plagued Weber this year has not been an inability to move and score the football.
We kind of hit that. Yep, I just realized that. We kind of hit that in the preview show. Like, Weber does not have a problem scoring points. Again, they put up 50 plus on Montana. Yes, it went to overtime, and they've had a couple different games like that went to overtime, and they scored extra points. But this has been the story of this Weber State team, is score a ton of points, but they lost the entirety of their coverage team. Their defensive line is semi-intact, but they are starting a completely different group in coverage, and they've had to score to hang in games. And honestly, Brian, I thought the Vandal defense was spectacular all day long. Yes, there was certainly the soft coverages that allow the team to move the ball every once in a while, like again the end of that second half. But when you come down to the final 2 drives, when Weber State is down 2 scores with 7 minutes to go, and they have 6 first downs in the whole game, pretty confident in that defense's ability to lock it down when it matters.
It's hard to do better than six allowed first downs through 3 3/4 of the game.
Yeah, honestly, like Brian, that's my immediate reaction, is not to toot my own horn, but toot. I don't have a whole lot of concerns with the Vandal defense. Are they dinged up? Yes. Would I love to see a little bit more pass rush success? Yes. I'm sure everybody would, but that's what happens when Keyshawn James Newby goes out, and Dallas Afalava has been on pitch counts, and this team is beat up.
I was actually surprised with the pass rush a little bit, just because what Weber does offensively often neutralizes pass rush, because they try to get the ball out of Richie Munoz's hand very quick. And look, Idaho picked up 2 sacks, both to Malachi Williams, but Munoz was under duress for quite a bit of this game, which was, this was what I thought. This was the best pass rush, the best outing for Idaho's pass rush in what feels like more than a month.
Yeah, 3 sacks. Don't forget, Amari Notice also had a sack. So 3 sacks today, which, is certainly fantastic. But, our Discord was not super thrilled with the defense at certain points of this game. And look, while again, there's certainly reason to have emotion in the moment.
Right.
They held Weber under 300 yards. Yes, they scored on that last drive, but realistically, if the safety and the corner don't take each other out trying to pick off a ball, Idaho wins this game 31-17. And I feel really, really good about holding a Weber State team that typically scores in the 30 plus points a game, held them to 17 points until the 43 seconds left of the game, and on a completely busted play on the craziest, weirdest stuff that you could have ever imagined. I don't know if I've ever seen two players completely take themselves out like that.
Well, the descriptive part that I'd add to this too is, hey, like when Idaho's offense wasn't clicking, the defense bailed them out 1,000 times and just made it completely irrelevant. Like, truly, it was special teams issues were why this game was competitive in the first half, because Weber had one actual sustained drive in the first half. I mean, they clearly couldn't have had many because they had 6 first downs when we were 90% through the game.
Yeah, Brian, the Weber drive chart here. In the first half, -3 yards, 6 yards, 9 yards, 40 yards, -7 yards, 53 yards. So they had 2 drives of 10 or more plays that had 40 yards and 53 yards respectively.
Yeah,
they were the touchdowns
both set up, and they're both set up off of special teams.
Yes, the first drive was on Idaho's 40, so they only had 40 yards to go to the end zone, and then the other was on the Weber 47, again because the kick coverage game was not good, Brian. I'm going to put it gently, not good.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, like we hit it. That's the story of the game. Idaho dominated defensively, and there are every game has its breaks, and Idaho had some breaks in their direction too. But Idaho's defensively was 2 breaks away from this being a 7-point game, as in allowing 7 points.
Mm-hmm. And again, you could also make the argument, that things could have broken differently, and Idaho could have been even closer. You could also make the argument that Idaho has a couple more breaks go their way on the offensive side of the ball, and Idaho puts up 50 on this team. For the most part, they moved the ball pretty well. Yes, first half was rusty, was crummy even. But Jack Lane, at the end of the day, 18 for 27, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have an absolutely horrendous pick that I'm sure he's going to get his ass chewed for. It was the kind of shit that I do when I'm a handful of edibles deep playing college football 25 or whatever the last Madden I played, where you're running to the sideline and you throw back across the body to the guy you think is kind of open. I can squeeze that in there, and you throw it directly into a defender's hands. That's basically what happened, except it bounced off the hands and then off the helmet of another defender, and it was an awful interception.
That still required some luck to even turn into a pick.
Yeah. I mean, the law of averages, making that throw across your body,
right,
running across the field, you're going to throw that pick every time.
And kind of the tone here too is just completely out of characteristic for what we've seen Lane do in his 5 starts. And I bring up that number, Dallas, because you and I, we sat together, you talked about it. Lane's just been in Idaho for a couple of years playing, so it can feel to us like he's played a lot. The dude hasn't. He's played 3 games in 2024. He started two other games the year before. That's it. So he's a redshirt sophomore who we feel like we know because he's been here forever. But no, he actually is very inexperienced. This season, he hasn't even played a single back-to-back games and playing back-to-back weeks this year. So look, there's going to be some rust. Most starting quarterbacks got to get through their 3rd start in week 3. Lane, because of injuries, it's just been different, but whatever. I'm ready to talk about some stuff offensively because that's a little bit more there's a little bit more to cover, I think, offensively as far as takeaways. Because I mean, defensively, this is straightforward. Idaho beat the shit out of Weber State, even with some breaks not going their way.
That's exactly what it is. Is Idaho was in pretty good control of this. Yes, I know at halftime they were down. Certainly hadn't put together the half I think anybody wanted, but honestly, midway through that second half, it was all right, all Idaho has to keep doing is kicking field goals, and Weber can't do anything defensively. They can't do anything until Idaho gets down to field goal range, and offensively, they did not match up well against the Vandal defense. I'm really encouraged, Brian. Idaho struggled to run the ball today. And while that isn't something to typically be encouraged by, I'm encouraged that Idaho still found a way to score 30 points and win this game without a dominating run game. Again, we heard running back 3 and running back 4 is what we came into the day with, and running back 3 and 4 were both unavailable by the end of the game. But yet Idaho still puts up 136 net yards. It's only 3.8 a carry, and Idaho still finds a way to win this game. That's not typical of what we've seen out of Vandal football. It's you typically got to be pretty good at running the ball. Didn't really have that today, and it still didn't really matter.
Well, no, and this first, second half offensively, just completely different as far as overall results. You know, in the first half, you want to talk about the drive chart, Dallas. In Idaho's first 5 possessions, 3 punts, a touchdown, and a turnover on downs. So I don't know, like it really felt like in the first quarter, it was just, I mean, Idaho was just kind of stuck in neutral offensively. In the second quarter, they started getting into this routine for a game, you might say, that kind of persists a little bit in the third quarter, where Idaho was starting to drive fine. But you get to that Weber 30-yard line, and the drives stalled out. Good news, bad news here, depending on who you are. So Idaho had about 4 consecutive drives that stalled out right around the Weber 30-ish yard line. One time, Idaho turned over on downs. Another time, and this is the big takeaway, 3 separate times Idaho settled for field goals, converted to field goals. Why is that a big deal? Well, those 3 field goals were easily the margin for this game based off how things broke. And we all love Jason Eck, everyone here. Just a complaint sometimes some fans have is like, come on, dude, take the points. And my good news here is I feel like Eck has learned the lesson of against better teams for sure. There are times where you just need to take the points, and hitting those 3 field goals, that's a difference in this game. This shift back to UC Davis, that's just not where Eck quite was at that point. I feel like he has a better handle on who he believes his team is and who they can be. And this is a team where getting the points matters. To me, that's actually trusting your defense. That, you know, like, hey, like look, the offense is going to get the ball back. It's fine that Idaho doesn't have to convert on the every single, 4th and 5 at the 30-yard line. That to me was a big deal. Then in the after a few drives in the second half, that's when Idaho really found their stride. That's when Jack Lane really started looking like the guy that we knew he could be. We saw him against Eastern. We saw him. I mean, Oregon doesn't really count, but I mean, honestly, doing this against Eastern and now Weber we have evidence that he'll do this against teams who aren't Idaho State. We knew that, but it's good to actually see it in front of us. And the way he plays is exactly like like Dallas, like we kind of hoped he would. He reads the field. He spreads the ball out. Does he hold on to it a little too long once in a while? What? Yeah, sure. Whatever. It's his 3rd goddamn start this year. So, I'm thrilled with the progress we have out of Jack Lane, and just how with him under center, Idaho now is one of the better offenses in the Big Sky. So we get to pair, if not the best, like the second best defense in the Big Sky to a top level offense. You know what that is, Dallas? That's a team that deserves a first round bye in the playoffs, and that's exactly where Idaho's cruising towards right now.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to key in on a couple different things here. This is still a team that is pretty banged up. Like, this is a team that has 2 of the starting offensive linemen from game 1 available. It's like the center, the right guard, and the right tackle are all gone. The defensive line, pretty beat up. The cornerback room has been pretty beat up. The running back room, I'm kind of wondering if we're going to have to recruit members out of the Patreon to suit up next week, because I don't know how many running backs are left on this roster. Like, this has been the most snake-bitten year I've ever seen for the Vandals. I don't remember a time that it has just felt like, man, just guys are going down left and right and left and right. But then you also had, LJ Harm had a couple incredible punts today, getting certainly inside the 20, but there were some that were inside the 10. Truly phenomenal there. Cameron Pope had a great day. The kicking game overall, really solid. Was really thrilled with that. Again, the defense looked great. The offense, yes, there's some hitches there, but you can see where there's potential, especially as Jack Lane gets beyond start number 5 of his career. They just got to clean up the coverage a little bit in special teams, and we can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, good news, bad news. Special teams. Owen Forsman had a very nice solo tackle.
Yeah, that's shout out to kickoff. I don't know if you technically still would be called the kicker Owen or the kickoff Owen, but anyways, phenomenal form on that tackle. Saved a touchdown, which is always what you want to hear about your kicker, that they are saving touchdowns.
Dallas, to answer your question from earlier, there are 2 running backs on the roster who left, other than the top 4, who all have varying degrees of injuries. Carlos Matheny, redshirt freshman, and Marky McKinnon, true freshman. That's it.
Great. So, yeah, gonna probably need more bodies than just 2 next week. So we'll see if, I mean, again, Nate Thomas did play, so hopefully he's going to be better. We don't know the status of Art Williams. Day was on crutches, so I'm not gonna predict he's playing. But yeah, you could need some more bodies in that room.
Yeah, Nate Thomas, 13 carries for 46 yards, and Art Williams had 10 carries for 67 yards, but 35 of them came on a single rush. So other than that, he was 9 carries for 32 yards. So when Dallas says like Idaho couldn't really run the ball that well, that's what he means. It wasn't like atrocious. It's just there's a reason Idaho passed as often as they did. And with Jack Lane, like that's fine. Like that, the Idaho offense is going. Idaho offensively can be quite effective with Lane under center, even if the running game isn't quite as sound as you might wish. But still, Dallas, you brought this up last week, is a thing you like to see. Idaho rushes 36 times. Now, like a few, 33. Take out. No, the Jack Lane numbers are screwed up. They rushed 36 times. They passed 27 times. So that's a little bit more that ratio that Idaho probably wants to have. However, that ratio is going to be a different way to interpret that. Is like, hey, was Idaho in control of this game? Well, yeah. And how do we know they're in control of the game? That's the game. That's the way they're able to play call on the offensive end. I think there's still more offensive stuff to talk about. But before we talk about further, we got to talk about show sponsor Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. One of the best buys in Idaho State liquor stores. Definitely worth. Hey, tonight might be a small batch night celebrating an undefeated home season for the first time in 30 years. That 1915 small batch, 3-grain whiskey, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley, double barrel finish in first fill bourbon, then it's finished in ex-Canadian rye whiskey casks. You want to get the entry-level Snake River Stampede? That's always a home run, too. It's that same 3-grain whiskey aged 2 fewer years, so 8 years for the Snake River Stampede, 10 years for the 1915 double barrel finish for the Stampede. Is first fill bourbon, then finished in Oloroso sherry casks. Can't go wrong either way. Grab yourself a Snake River. Dallas, I got a couple questions I just want to ask you offensively before we get to players of the game. So we covered the descriptive part of, hey, Idaho went from not just kind of stuck in neutral to they're driving, they stall out at 30, honestly, like 4 or 5 consecutive drives, and then turn a corner. What 2 things, you answer whichever one you want. What did you see about Idaho offensively that seemed to explain why they were stalling out at the 30? Or what happened differently in that halfway through the 3rd quarter and into the 4th where Idaho was able to hit that 4th gear and really take control of the game?
Without going back and watching the actual tape, because again, it's a little bit different when we're standing there screaming at the defense for most of the game there,
or for the goddamn person who runs the music to quit fucking playing songs when Idaho's on offense. That was rough. That you could see the shout out to Jonathan Jacobs in our Discord pointing out that the coaches were even starting to get pissed off at it. It's 2nd and 4, and all of a sudden the music hits 10 out of 10 and plays for 5 seconds as the team is lining up at the line of scrimmage, and Lane is directing guys. Come on, let's kill that. Let's understand how things are going here. Sam Buffington in the comment section, the music hurt my ears on offense. And Simon Miller +1 Brian amateur hour. Yeah, that was a train wreck. That's high school bullshit right there. It's not what you should be getting out of a D1 football team. Got to do better with that. The student section had that problem a couple years ago of cheering on offense, and they've finally figured that out. Now we just got to get the rest of the dome to realize, hey, the Vandals are on offense. Let's get down here.
let's keep.
And when you say rest of the dome, you mean the people paid to produce the games.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm getting at, Brian. Honestly, I didn't see anything immediately that was screaming out to me of like, oh, that's the change that was made. Great, this is why things are going completely differently in the second half, because I didn't think things did go a whole lot differently in the second half. Yes, Idaho had the drives that stalled out, but when you take out those punts, Idaho moved the ball well enough. They moved the ball about the same in the second half as they did the first half. They just didn't end up punting, and then Weber was obviously not punting. So they had less drives in the second half. But for me, what I noticed, Brian, is honestly they let Jack Lane throw it a little bit more in the second half, and which is hilarious coming from the guy who's always sitting here saying, "Hey, run the ball more, run the ball more." They let Lane throw it a little bit more. I thought Weber did a really good job of, again, selling out to stop the run. Other than Art Williams' 35-yard carry, which was huge, there were only a couple different runs that were broken that were more than 5 yards. Like they did a very good job of committing to the gaps, filling the gaps, and not letting Idaho do much. So then in the second half, I felt they let Lane unleash the arm a little bit more. There's discussions to be had about his wrist and his health, and yeah, we're again talking about his 5th start here. But as Ross Warren says in the comment section, Lane's throwing was okay, generally good decision making. Like, yeah, there were a couple throws. He airmailed one in the end zone to Dwyer that could have maybe had a PI on it, but honestly, it would have been pretty hard for Dwyer to get there. Ross Warren also saying, good Lord, no zip on that ball when he did throw. Yeah, there not a lot of speed on it. Again, don't know if that was intentional. Don't know if that's injury related. Don't know what that's from. But I think the reason Mark Hamper exploded in the second half, he had the touchdown in the first half, but the second half he was all over the place, is because Jack Lane just does such a good job of getting through the progression and hitting the right guy at the right time. Hamper's second touchdown, I said it out loud. I don't know if you heard it, Brian, but his second touchdown, as he's going across the field, I said it out loud. Oh, Hamper, he's got him. And about half a second after I said that, the ball goes into the air. Hamper catches it. It's a touchdown. Like, it's a different offense when Jack Lane is given the time to look across the field. David Judd behind us said the same thing. Like, this is like it is very viscerally different watching Jack Lane in control. If he has enough time to stand in the pocket, even he looks across the field, you can just see it, you can feel it, and that's what the difference for me was. I'm sure there was again things that they changed schematically. Standing because we didn't really sit. Standing in the dome, it was hard to know exactly what that change was. But long ramble to recap here, Brian. Jack Lane is just the guy is different.
You're saying the main thing was they leaned on Jack Lane a little more heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, the evidence that I'd point to just drive chart in the second half for Idaho. No punts. Idaho scored 4 times in the second half. They scored on, I'm not counting their final possession where Idaho kneeled a few times. In Idaho's 5 second half possessions, we had 4 touchdowns and then the 1 awful pick. So in the second half, Idaho essentially moved the ball every single drive when they weren't throwing a pick or when they weren't taking a knee. Yeah,
and then again they had 3 3-and-outs in the first half, or in the first quarter they had 3 3-and-outs. But the second quarter they moved the ball well. They did have 1 drive in the first quarter that they scored a touchdown on. They just got out of those punts, which 2 of those 3 punts. First one was run that got 5 yards, and then credit to Weber's coaching staff realizing, however they did, that if they just trained the defensive line to stick their arms up earlier, that's all they did. Just put the arm up 1 second before Lane went to pass. 2 different batted balls at the line of scrimmage. I don't know if I've seen a Vandal quarterback ever have a pass batted at the line, back-to-back passes, and then punted. Idaho gets the ball again, run, punt. So by the time that we got to the second quarter, and then especially into the third and fourth, Lane was throwing the ball a little bit deeper, and then everything changed. And again, here we are.
Just say one thing too before we shift that I think we should acknowledge, because like, hey, we've talked that like, hey, special teams, they good and bad today in special teams, right? Idaho did change strategically what they're doing on kickoffs when that was what was giving Weber a chance at all. And when Idaho started kicking short, just kicking, so like they didn't do the exact same thing every single time either. Like, hey, there was a couple like ground ball kicks or a couple like, more pooch kicks, whatever. They took Weber's return game off the table, and then Idaho just had Weber's number defensively. So that was how the special team issue was taken care of. So, which to me that was part of how Idaho controlled this game. Even though it was a 7-point game, even though Idaho was down at halftime, I was 0% anxious through the entirety of the game. And honestly, when Idaho took their lead on, I don't remember which field goal it was. They gave Idaho its first lead. I think it was first field goal, second half. At that point, what I thought was not relief is like, well, finally. And now the game is going to be over.
Yeah, pretty much spot on there, Brian. But before we get into getting to the players of the game and wrapping this show up, we've got to talk about the greatest all-inclusive week-long vacation you can get right in your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been Vandal owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the middle fork of the Salmon, the main salmon river of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. You could check out special trips. Whew, Tubbs After Dark, folks. Special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on. Brian? You're muted. Damn it. That didn't work. Camp on.
Pristine bitches.
Thank you. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs. And like I'm always saying, guys, fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire USA. Just bring your clothes, and Colin and HRE are going to handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now, 406-540-4450, or check them out at hughesriver.com. Brian, I think I know where you're going to go with this. Your player of the game on the offense.
Man, well, I think there's two options, and I know the one you're going to go with, so I'm going to go with Jack Lane. 18 to 27, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He also had a couple timely rushes, 3 rushes for 22 yards, including an 11-yard rush. I just got to say, man, I love this team with Jack Lane under center. So many things are fixed. So many discussions we had throughout the season, but like, hey, on the show and just in our hashtag Only Tubbs Discord, patreon.com/Tubbs the Club. Jack Lane showing up resolves all those things. The offense that you see Idaho run with Lane out there. It is sometimes when you do shows like this, Dallas, because we're Idaho nerds, right? Like we pay a lot of attention. We know lots of listeners pay attention to Idaho sports, but just compared to other people, like this is our thing. Sometimes like the nerd out discussions you have before a season, they don't really turn out that way because coaches they understand things different than fans do. We were right about this one. The offense with Jack Lane is the ball spread. It's honestly, I think defensively, it's pretty tough to prepare for unless you can get to Jack Lane quick. That's it, because he cycles through progressions the ways virtually no one else in the FCS, or at least in the Big Sky, does as a passer. Maybe Miles Hastings, the only guy I'd compare it to. So even Jack Lane having a rough start, for the first couple drives, even being rusty, you might say, in his third start. I just love this team with Jack Lane under center. So yeah. And by the way, he delivered for the overwhelming majority of this game.
Yeah. I mean, with a stat line like 18 for 27, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then the most god awful, mind blowing pick I've seen in a very long time. You take that one out, and this was essentially a perfect game from Jack Lane. And yes, Brian, definitely credit to us for mentioning that last year, that we thought Lane had a really good chance at winning this job, even if Giovanni McCoy was here. For those not paying a ton of attention, Giovanni McCoy has lost the starting job at Oregon State, as that program is pretty much circling the drain at this point. It's kind of what's going to happen with the Pac-12. Wazoo was in a better situation because they still got to keep their coach. Oregon State, Jonathan Smith, left for greener pastures. We wish Giovanni the best, and hope, if he's at Oregon State next year, hopefully he gets that job back. But man, just Jack Lane has just not, I haven't seen a quarterback for Idaho do this since, honestly, maybe Matt Linehan. Like it's been a while since we've had a quarterback that I have truly believed like he will go win this game with his arm and his eyes. Loved Giovanni for what he did running around, but man, it was Jack Lane. Jack Lane's arm and eyes are everything, and that's where we get to my player of the game, as I think anybody could mention. Super George 111 in the comment section pointing it out. It's Mark Hamper. I was beating the drum pretty hard earlier in the season that like some of Mark Hamper's drops were not necessarily his fault. Yes, if the ball hits you in the hands, yes, you should catch it. But at the same time, the ball doesn't need to be so damn hard to catch every time. It doesn't need to be where you're trying to toe tap it on the sidelines because it's coming to you at the very end of your route. That's not what was happening. It happened right in front of us, and I turned to you and said it right to you, Brian. I was like, we've seen this exact play, this exact route, and this exact play. And Wagner, again, redshirt freshman, totally understandable, hit him at the absolute last possible second he could have, and he kind of bobbled it on the sideline. Well, instead, what happened today, he hits Hamper in stride, he catches it in stride, and turns and starts making his way up the field. And that's what I was really trying to get people to focus on when there were a lot of talks about Hamper's dropping a lot of balls. Yes, receivers drop balls sometimes. It happens. But when you're throwing a better ball on time, those drops do go away. It's not always on the receiver. Sometimes the quarterback just has to get the ball in there in a better time. That's what happened today. And man, Mark Hamper looked insanely good. I really think Mark Hamper and Jordan Dwyer is going to be one hell of a combo for the next handful of years, assuming they're going to be here for a couple more years. But I think those guys are going to be studs, Brian.
Yeah, and I mean, while you're talking, one of the things I was just trying to think about is like trying to get a rhythm as a receiver when this isn't meant as a put down to Jack Wagner, but like, hey, just stylistically, Jack Lane is pretty dang accurate with a lot of touch on his throws. And Wagner was objectively not as accurate, but he also puts a lot more on his throws. So like, as far as like getting your rhythm down with a receiver, I think Mark Hamper uniquely just him and Wagner didn't connect. And I think you're right. We both talked about this on the show about this was your drum. I snuck in a few beats there too. That we think that's part of why some of the drops took place. And now like, hey, you see Lane hitting those tight windows and the drop problem is pretty much gone. And drops were a problem early in the year for reasons you already covered tonight. We don't need to relitigate that twice in 2 minutes.
I'll also say it's obviously we're in the end of the season. Certainly the receivers are going to get slightly better at catching the ball as the years go and the days go and the weeks go and the games go because they're getting more of those reps. So, I just don't want this to sound like we're putting down Jack Wagner. This is not necessarily Jack Wagner's fault. It's just a completely different kind of ball.
Yeah.
Taylor Cash in the comment section. Shout out to Dwyer to not taking the back judge ref's bait and not drawing an unsportsmanlike penalty. The back judge is a bitch. Hand up. Agree with you on that one, T Cash. Kevin Ridenour. We got spoiled with Hatton making superhuman catches. Like that is a huge thing. Huge spoiling of Vandal fans over the last few years because honestly, before Hayden Hatton, Jeff Cotton was doing the same thing. All you had to do was throw the damn ball up and that guy was going to probably go get it. There's not a lot of receivers out there that are the kind of guy that's going to have the body control to go high point that ball and beat a corner 90% of the time. Most of the time, that ball has to hit that route at a pretty good window for that receiver to be able to make the catch.
I also want to, I don't know if you brought this up earlier. I just want to hit this. Simon Miller saying props to Brian for keeping me sane for the Kibby Dome while I was watching the SWX production. In the hashtag Only Tubs Discord, again, patreon.com/Tubs it's the best place to talk Vandal football. If you don't live locally and you want to be engaged online during games, I don't know what you're doing, having not joined the Discord yet. It costs less than a cup of coffee a month. You can always do more, which we're cool with. But there was some anxiety in the first half, through our Discord, and I think you guys can tell me and Dallas were not anxious during this game. Like, a little confused about some things not clicking, but never anxious. And it's because they were ready to talk defensive players of the game. We have bigger takeaways to hit on later. So I'm going to steal the wheel for a second. My defensive player of the game, Malachi Williams. Malachi Williams, he's on the other side of the line as Keyshawn James Newby. I think he had his best game of the year. 7 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for losses, including 2 sacks, and he forced a fumble too. One of the things that's been fun about this Vandal defense, especially today, as guys are injured, which obviously I wish didn't happen, other guys get their chance to shine. And Malachi Williams was just not a name that we've been able to say quite as much. He missed virtually all of last year with injuries. Today, Malachi Williams' impact absolutely mattered for this game. Sacks were timely, forcing the fumbles a big deal. So yeah, number 15 on the defensive side of the ball gets my game ball.
Yeah, I think if I were to be giving out a game ball to the player of the game defensively, I'd probably have picked Malachi Williams. But I'm going to give a handful of different shout outs here because I think there's a bunch of guys that had good games, while I do think Malachi Williams had probably the best game of anybody. Tommy McCormick, 10 tackles. I mean, always solid, always making plays. I thought Dwayne McDougal looked really good, but you guys know, I think I've been talking about him for years now. I really like the way Dwayne McDougal plays. Made some really good tackles in the middle of the field. Honestly, when tackling has been an issue, it's been nice to see the guys that are consistently doing a good job of that, and McDougal's been doing that. I thought Xavier Slayton and Sam Brown also got some pressure to the quarterback, maybe didn't get the payoff. Amari Notice had a sack. Dallas Afalava got some pressure in there. Like, on the whole, the defensive line was truly outstanding. But I'm going to give it to Zach Johnson. Zach Johnson had a handful of tackles, forced a fumble. Honestly, the Vandals forced a couple fumbles and should have gotten at least one of them. Honestly, should have gotten both of them. But that's just sometimes the way fumble luck works. The ball hits the ground and it does weird shit. And unfortunately, Idaho didn't recover anything, but a couple forced fumbles, one of those by Malachi Williams, the other by Zach Johnson. Those should have been game-changing, huge impact plays instead of how they recovered the ball, and it was just a couple lost yards instead of a massive changing turnover. Brian, we are well over 45 minutes at this point. This is one of our longer instant reactions coming to everybody, instantly, as instantly as we can be after a 2+ hour drive with a bunch of snow. Your final thoughts of Weber State versus Idaho?
Idaho's just played so many damn weird games. I had a member message me a thing to pay attention to with Idaho defensively is second halves for a lot of this season. Idaho's been very tight defensively, which is to say, like, hey, first half, they're playing a little more zone, a little more base, and get a little more aggressive. In the second half, that just appears to be Dan Jackson's rhythm. This game kind of had that. Not exactly, because again, like, it was honestly, like, if not for those kickoff punt returns, then Weber probably has no points in the first half. But this was a great. We expect there's going to be another home game, right? Because we expect Idaho, who sees Idaho State, who gave up 77 points to Eastern this week. We probably agree, without previewing that yet, that Idaho State is a uniquely bad matchup for the Bengals with Idaho. But this was a kick-ass home season. Wild that there was less than 10,000 there, because I can tell you the energy that was there tonight was better than the 14-ish for the Eastern game, and it wasn't
significantly better.
It was absolutely not close. This was a bit. If I was given the choice between an Eastern crowd of 13, 14, and this crowd of 9-ish every week, I'd take this crowd of 9 every single week. Not close, no question. The end.
100% agree.
A kick-ass regular home season. And you and I have joked about this in games. I try to bring it up a little bit on the show. I have heard people say 1,000 times, like, hey, like, why Idaho plays all these close games? Like, can't they just win one easy? And my reaction to that is always, you know what you call a season when you win enough games to be the 5 or 6 seed in the playoffs and all the games are tight? You probably call that one of the most fun seasons you're going to experience your entire life. So, yeah, just please, guys, don't lose sight of that. The football season is unbelievably fast. I was talking to my younger brother on the drive home, who's a WSU fan, who also follows Idaho, and could not believe that Idaho has just one game left in the regular season. So this thing we look forward to the whole year, that's been just fun as hell. We've got one more week before playoff time and our Selection Sunday reaction, which we're going to get to. But my overall takeaways are, this has been a very hard team to project this year week by week and decide what takeaways actually matter, largely because of injuries. And I just want to say, like, my takeaway now is, hey, I was on the show more strident last week saying, hey, like, that first 3-week defense, I don't think they're coming back. I was wrong. No, they were back in the second half against Portland State. They were back for virtually the entire time against Weber. The good news is this Idaho team looks like they're finding they're playing their best football as the season comes to a close. And that is about all you can ask of a team and coaching staff. So third kick-ass year. It just insane to think Idaho last season, they're the 4 seed. Idaho loses a shit ton to graduation and transfer. We have catastrophic injury luck, and Idaho's in line to be the 5 or 6 seed. Just an incredible 2-year run. Yeah, you can talk about 3, but these last 2 years to me have just been magical. And I really hope we get to extend that further into the playoffs.
Yeah, really hoping that this train doesn't end, because this has been, Brian, the Vandals have won more games than they've lost for 3 straight seasons. I don't think that's ever happened in my lifetime. I would really be hard pressed to believe that has happened in my lifetime. I was born in the early 90s. I certainly don't remember it happening. If it did, I was, a wee lad, and I certainly don't have the recollection of what 93 and 94 and 92 looked like. But for me, Brian, the biggest takeaway until the final 2 drives, which again were Weber State down two possessions, and then Weber State with the game essentially already decided, they had punted 7 times and they had 6 first downs. Like, for any panic that folks may have had about this team, they punted 7 times, and on every one of those drives, they did not have a first down. They had 8 separate drives that were either 3 and out or 4 and out. That is insane. Simon Miller, Dallas was born when I was at U of I. I am younger than I look, and sound, weirdly enough, and act, actually, other than the profanity like a 13-year-old. That's my takeaway, Brian, is, like, yes, this is a Weber State team that is not particularly good and not going anywhere, and certainly a lost season for them. But like Brett Hines said, best they'd played in 6 weeks. And if this is the best they've played in 6 weeks, man, this is a hell of a defense here for that Weber State team that is a team that puts up a bunch of points. If Idaho held them to 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 40-yard touchdown drive, punt off of 3 and out, 11 play 53-yard drive, and then a 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 4 and out. And at that point, it's in the fourth quarter. That is fucking asinine how good that is. That is insanely good defense. Brian, your favorite thing to say, well, you take out the touchdown there at the end of the second quarter, but right before that, you're like, well, holding them to 100 yards and a touchdown in one half, over 2 halves, that's what we would call the best defense in the country. A 28-point lead, allowing 28 points wouldn't be that, but man, the game they put together today, what should have been 17 points without two players accidentally taking themselves out and allowing a guy to score a touchdown, man, I have no fear in this defense. That like I believe there is nothing that is happening right now that makes me think this defense can't handle it. This defense is going to survive at least one playoff game. Maybe not the North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana State gauntlet, but man, outside of those three, I'll take our shot with anybody.
Yeah. Especially with, I mean, you think of how tight Idaho played Davis earlier in the year, and now, but that was with a bottom three in the Big Sky offense with Jack Lane. No, like the math completely switches. There's a ton of the season we get to throw out once we have our already strong defense mixed with a team that can move the ball and attack teams in a way that is just different from a lot of the other teams in the Big Sky. And I say different because I think, hey, look at Montana State. How you prep for them is different than virtually everyone. Idaho is in a different way, that what they do offensively, you have to prep for differently for other reasons, which we can always talk about later because we're really closing in on an hour. We're past midnight. It's probably time for us to call it a night. But to put a button on it, my takeaway is defensively, that first 3 weeks team is back. And the offense that we thought we were going to see out of Idaho in week 1, it's here.
I feel, Brian, the Bengal Killer is going to have a fun time next week down in Polka Hellhole, and we are going to be feeling pretty good about this team on selection.
I thought the game was in Polka Dildo.
You are correct. Sorry, the game is in Polka Dildo. It is not Polka Hellhole anymore now that the Porno Dome has transformed into just the hoarder corners. So, Brian, it's time. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.